Well, the establishment has tried maybe everything it can to destroy the British Labour Party's most popular leader in its history. Instead of reporting that Labour is now the largest left-wing party in Western Europe, the media and Labour MPs who voted for NATO wars and neoliberalism compare those who support Jeremy Corbyn to Nazis. But unlike in the United States, where Bernie Sanders lost his battles with the neoliberal fan base of Hillary Clinton, Corbyn is actually now the bookies' favourite to be the next Prime Minister of Britain. One of his allies is a politician who has been particularly targeted. Those training their gun sights on Ken Livingstone include the media and Blairite supporters of Owen Smith, the former Pfizer pharmaceutical PR man now challenging Corbyn for the leadership. He has been labelled an anti-Semite on the BBC without anything so much as an attempt to balance the views of his detractors. He has in recent months been reviewing UK defence policy vis-à-vis Britain's Trident weapons of mass destruction programme in Scotland. He previously had one of the largest individual left-wing mandates in the world when he was elected as the Mayor of London, and he joins me now. Again, thanks so much for coming back on the show. So Owen Smith says he's basically the same on policy as Corbyn, except on nuclear weapons. Do you think that's true?
Well, it's very interesting because basically we've all known about Jeremy for the last 40 years. His position's been consistent and all of that. Owen Smith's basically appeared from nowhere now claiming to be broadly in agreement with Jeremy, except on everything but Trident. And if that's the case, well, let's stick with someone who has got that public support, which Owen hasn't, I'm afraid. Jeremy comes over as a regular, normal guy. You look at the house he lives in, and you look at the clothes he wears. This is not someone who came into politics to line their own pockets like so many did in all parties. He's there to do things for ordinary people and make their life better. And if Owen really agreed with Jeremy, he wouldn't have been stabbing him in the back and opening up this leadership campaign just at a time when the Tory party has got this huge conflict over, are they actually going to leave Europe? Are they going to stay in, but with some minor changes?
Well, Owen, of course, wants, maybe a second referendum. But on policy, Owen Smith says he would renationalise the railways tomorrow. Jeremy Corbyn says he's going to allow the rail franchises to expire naturally. Is there a danger that Corbyn is basically selling out already?
No. I mean, the simple fact is that, these rail companies have got these contracts. You'd have to take a lot of time, legislation, to bring them back into control. And the real issue...
Owen Smith says he'd do it tomorrow.
Well, you can't do that tomorrow. You need to get legislation through Parliament. You need to find the money. I mean, if you look at London's bus network, which has been transformed, all those buses are owned by private companies. But as mayor, I regulated them. I told them what their fares would be, how often they'd run, and all of that. And so you don't need to nationalise big private sector firms. You need to regulate them properly. And that way you can get the control you want without spending a penny.
Very third way of you. Until the run-up to the election which Boris Johnson won as Mayor of London, your poll ratings have always been high in this country. But how do you explain Jeremy Corbyn's low poll ratings?
Well, my poll ratings weren't always high. When I became the leader of the GLC in 1981, after 4 months, my poll rating was 18%. All the sort of stuff you're seeing done to Jeremy now. I was pro-IRA terrorist, I was a closet homosexual, and that, in those days, that was very damaging politically. All that sort of stuff was thrown at me. But like Jeremy, I never gave into it. I just carried on pushing for the things I believed in. 3 years later, Mrs. Thatcher had to abolish the next GLC election because we were heading towards a landslide. And I'd been elected runner-up to the Pope in the BBC's Man of the Year poll. So, I mean, the thing about Jeremy is, over these months and years to come, he will get across. He's got an economic strategy which will create jobs for ordinary people, build homes for their kids. He offers everybody a chance in their future.
So the poll ratings stuff is all nonsense when it comes to Owen Smith supporters who keep coming back again and again saying, you see, this is why Smith should be the leader.
There's two reasons, two big factors determine every election outcome. Whether people like the leader of each of the parties, as we're seeing with Trump and Hillary, that's quite a factor out in America. But the most important is the economic strategy. And for the last 35 years, under Thatcher and Blair, we've had all this neoliberal nonsense: privatise, smash the unions, cut taxes on the big corporations and the rich. And it's not led to any boost in investment. It hasn't created wonderful new jobs, which we all promised. Jeremy's strategy is massive investment in our infrastructure. So, I mean, our roads, our fibre optic system, they are awful compared with many of our competitors. That's what... I mean, if you actually look at London's success, I got billions of pounds from the then Labour government into modernising our transport system. Then big business came along and started investing. And that's the key. investment outweighs every other economic factor. Jeremy's committed to that, has been right the way through his political career, and that will reach people. People will understand that.
But in fairness, you've been suspended from Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party. Why do you think Jeremy Corbyn doesn't suspend, say, one of the Labour Party's largest donors, who was in the newspapers recently calling supporters of Corbyn Nazis? Well, literally, that's not.
I mean, the problem, Jeremy's inherited both a parliamentary Labour Party skewed to the right because of Blair's control, but also a party machine. I wasn't suspended by Jeremy Corbyn, I was suspended by the bureaucracy. And now, actually, the things the bureaucracy have done to try and prevent Jeremy being re-elected are stunning. For Labour's National Executive to actually say that people who joined 6 months ago aren't allowed to vote, I mean, it's outrageous. It's like something you'd expect, out of some Latin American dictatorship in the 1970s.
Well, the courts here agree with
you
with
can't
Tom
be
Watson
surprised that the courts are going to support reactionaries who want to keep someone like Jeremy out of power. But the important thing is...
Is that really what you think about
Absolutely.
the Court of Appeal judge, who is close to Tony Blair, as was revealed?
I mean, absolutely, an old friend of Tony Blair. Look, think back, when I was leader of the GLC, we cut the fares. Judges ruled it was illegal, outrageous. I mean, I'd won an election committed to cutting the fares. Along come a bunch of judges, all of whom have got chauffeur-driven cars, of course, and they say, well, that's illegal. So I'm afraid our judges aren't ever going to be a front for revolutionary leftism.
But, of course, the Labour Party resorted to the courts for that decision.
Well, that's the problem. I mean, no one in the Labour Party machine should have the right to actually decide to go to those courts unless the leader of the party supports that. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn got a phone call to say I was being suspended, accusations I was anti-Semitic. Do you know, no one in the bureaucracy phoned to actually check what I had said. And I've seen, you had Labour MPs running around saying I was a Nazi apologist after a lifetime of supporting Jewish, black, women's groups, lesbian, gay, every minority that's being discriminated against, I fought for.
Okay, Owen Smith voted to bomb Africa's richest per capita nation, the one led by the man that you were accused of getting money from, Libya, and now he's also saying he wants to talk to ISIS-Daesh. Do you think he's out of his depth on foreign policy?
What's interesting about Owen is that now he's claiming to be a lefty, but I mean, there he was voting to bomb Libya, and after the disaster of Iraq and Afghanistan, you have to think, why would anyone do that? And we look at the chaos now. And that horror, I mean, completely divided, a civil war going on, I mean, so many dead. And somebody wants to spend £40 billion on 4 nuclear submarines. Well, I don't think there's any chance of, we're about to go to war with Russia, frankly. What Russia's looking for is open deals with the West, better trade. They don't want to, we're not going to go back to World War II or the Cold War. And we should be reaching out to Russia just in the same way that we've been reaching out to China.
Where have all the Iraq war supporting Labour people gone? Because at least the leadership campaign has stopped, presumably, in your view, the Hillary Benns, Angela Eagles. Where are they? Are they going to suddenly re-emerge if Owen Smith is elected? Or...
Well, I mean, Owen Smith's not going to be re-elected. I mean, the issue for all those MPs who were loyal little rubber stamps for Tony Blair in the new Labour years is when Jeremy wins, you've got a choice to make. You either now get behind Jeremy and we focus on getting rid of this awful government, or you go off and form another party. But they're all very much aware 35 years ago, a group of Labour MPs split. Almost all of them lost their seats at the next election. And I don't think there's any real prospect of that. They're going to have to come to terms with the fact that MPs can't have a veto over the say of the British public. 500,000 people, basically, in the Labour Party, and a surge of support for Jeremy, not because he's got a nice face or they like his beard, but because he's got an alternative strategy which will give chance and opportunity to their children and their grandchildren.
Well, those MPs obviously still won't agree, presumably, and yet Corbyn and McDonnell continue to deny any chances, it seems, of mandatory reselection of
well, that's my one.
MPs. Why do they do that?
My one disagreement with Jeremy.
Well, could that be fatally flawed in their strategy?
In a sense, I mean, what will happen is we're about to have a big boundary review. The constituencies are going to be changed. We're going to go from 650 MPs down to 600, so huge change. And Labour MPs will have to be looking for support. They're going to have to face basically a selection. So it's not mandatory, it's not going to be permanent, but virtually every Labour MP coming up to the next election is going to have to go through a selection process. And I think a lot of them are going to recognise they're not going to get through that if they carry on stabbing Jeremy in the back.
And just finally, do you believe they should also be making more of a an issue of media ownership regulations. The media obviously don't like McDonnell or Corbyn. Do you think they should fight this out stronger or try and acquiesce? They seem to be going on again and again on mainstream media, trying to be nice.
There's very good regulation of radio and television. I mean, there's no real regulation of our newspapers. I mean, 3/4 of the papers we read are owned by 4 billionaires, none of whom pay tax in this country. They will tell any lie they can to stop Jeremy getting elected because he's going to make them pay their fair share of tax. And if we can do that, we can afford to pay for the extra nurses and doctors and teachers. We don't need to increase taxes on ordinary people. We just got to stop Google and Starbucks and the super rich funneling all their money through Panama and offshore islands.
Ken Livingstone, thank you.